I never thought a tree could start a war. A tree, of all things. But that's exactly what happened in the sleepy little suburb of Maplewood, where everyone smiles when they pass you on the sidewalk, but keeps a mental ledger of every single thing you do. It started on a crisp Saturday morning in late October. The leaves were just beginning to turn, fiery reds and golden yellows painting the streets. I had just stepped outside with my first cup of coffee, still wearing the old hoodie I've had since college, when I noticed something strange. Across the street, standing by her mailbox, was her. Carol. Every neighborhood has one, and in Maplewood, it was her. 60 years old, always in pastel-colored sweatsuits, lipstick too bright for her pale skin, and eyes that missed nothing. Carol was the kind of neighbor who would report you to the HOA if your grass grew half an inch too long. She didn't have kids, didn't have a husband, just a dog that yapped like it was paid to, and a nose permanently stuck in everyone else's business. And today, she was staring at my yard, more specifically at my tree. It wasn't anything special, just a tall maple I'd planted when my wife, Sarah, and I bought the house 5 years ago. It gave us shade in the summer, color in the fall, and a little privacy from prying eyes. Or so I thought. "Morning, Carol," I called out, forcing a polite smile. She didn't return it. Instead, she tilted her head toward the tree like it had personally offended her. "That tree's getting awfully big, Mark," she said, her voice carrying just enough judgment to make my stomach clench. "Yeah," I said slowly, not sure where this was going. "That's the idea. It's a tree." Her lips pinched into a thin line. "It's blocking the view. When I sit in my living room, all I see now is leaves." I blinked. Was this real? Okay. I guess that's kind of the point. Privacy, you know? Carol's eyes narrowed, like I'd just confessed to plotting a murder. "Maplewood has guidelines about landscaping, Mark. And that tree," she jabbed a manicured finger at it, "is violating the spirit of the neighborhood." I almost laughed. The spirit of the neighborhood? What did that even mean? But I didn't, because I knew Carol. And Carol didn't make idle comments. She made threats. "Look, Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "The tree's on my property. It's not hurting anyone. I'm not cutting it down." She smiled then, a thin, icy smile that made my blood run cold. "Well," she said sweetly, "we'll see about that." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked back into her house, her little dog trotting behind her like a furry shadow. I should have shrugged it off. I should have gone inside, had another coffee, and forgotten the whole thing. But that night, as Sarah and I sat on the couch watching a movie, I couldn't shake it. Carol's words kept echoing in my head. "We'll see about that." "What's wrong with you?" Sarah asked, pausing the movie. I told her. About Carol. About the tree. About the way she looked at me, like she'd already won some secret battle. Sarah rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, Mark. It's Carol. She's bored and lonely and needs something to do. Don't let her get to you." Easy for her to say. Sarah worked late most nights at the hospital. She didn't have to live with Carol watching every move, judging every decision. But I let it go. For a while. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. Notice of violation, tree height and placement. The HOA. I crumpled the paper in my fist, my jaw tightening. It said the tree was encroaching on neighborhood visibility and had to be trimmed down or removed within 30 days. Failure to comply would result in daily fines. I didn't have to guess who filed the complaint. That night, I stood in the yard staring at that tree. The air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, and for the first time since we planted it, I hated looking at it, not because of the tree itself, but because of what it now represented, a fight I never asked for, but one I sure as hell wasn't going to lose. Sarah came out, pulling her sweater tighter against the chill. "It's just a tree, Mark. Cut it back a little. It's not worth the stress." I turned to her, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "That's the thing, Sarah. It's not just a tree. It's about control. Carol thinks she owns this street, and the HOA backs her up because no one else wants to deal with her crap. If we give in now, what's next? Our fence, our mailbox, the color of our damn front door." Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "Fine. Do what you want. Just don't let it get ugly." But it already was. Because in that moment, staring at the tree, I made a decision. If Carol wanted a fight over one tree, she was about to get a forest. And I was going to make sure she regretted every smug word she'd ever said to me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a glass of whiskey, and a plan forming in my head. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I searched for bulk tree suppliers, landscaping equipment rentals, and delivery services that worked fast, overnight fast. And the crazier the idea sounded, the more I loved it. By the time the clock struck midnight, I'd spent more money than I cared to admit. But I didn't care, because this wasn't just about a tree anymore. This was about pride, about freedom, about proving that I wasn't some pushover who let a nosy neighbor run his life. When I finally crawled into bed beside Sarah, she stirred. "What are you doing?" she mumbled sleepily. "Just making plans," I whispered. She didn't ask what kind. And the next day, before the sun came up, the first truck pulled up in front of my house, its headlights cutting through the fog. 50 trees. All mine. And that was just the beginning. The sound of diesel engines rumbling down our quiet street before dawn was the sweetest thing I'd ever heard. I slipped on a jacket and stepped outside into the cool morning air just as the first flatbed truck pulled to a stop in front of my house. The driver, a big guy with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low, hopped out and gave me a nod. "You Mark?" "Yep," I said, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was pounding. He glanced at his clipboard. 50 trees. All young, all potted. Where do you want 'em? I grinned. "Front yard. Backyard. Anywhere there's dirt." The guy gave me a long look, like he wanted to ask what kind of lunatic orders 50 trees overnight, but he didn't. He just shrugged and waved his crew over. And then, for the next 2 hours, the trucks kept coming, one after another, stacked with green. My driveway, my lawn, even part of the street became a staging area for what looked like a small forest. Young maples, birches, spruces, all lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. I could feel the neighborhood waking up around me, curtains twitching, front doors cracking open. And then, inevitably, Carol. She stormed out of her house in a pink bathrobe, her hair in curlers, looking like she'd just caught me spray painting the American flag. "What on earth is going on here?" she screeched, her voice slicing through the morning air. I turned to her slowly, sipping my coffee like I had all the time in the world. "Morning, Carol. Nice day for a little gardening, huh?" Her eyes darted to the rows of trees, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You can't do this. This is a neighborhood, not a forest." "Pretty sure it's still my property," I said, flashing her my most innocent smile. "And there's no rule against trees. At least, none that I've seen." Carol's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "I'm calling the HOA. Be my guest," I said, already turning back to the workers. "Plant 'em deep, fellas. Let's make this place green again." By noon, my yard looked like something out of a nature documentary. The single maple that had started this whole mess now had an army of companions, saplings lining the property edges, clusters of birches forming little groves, and a few evergreens standing tall like sentinels. Sarah came home around lunchtime, and the look on her face was priceless. "What the hell, Mark?" she said, stepping out of her car with her hands in the air like she was approaching a crime scene. "Surprise," I said, trying not to laugh. "You said you were making plans, not building a freaking forest." "Carol wanted a clear view," I said, grinning. "Now she's got something better, a scenic woodland." "Mark," she pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling hard. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do?" "The HOA is going to find me," I cut in. "Let them try. There's no law against trees. And you know what? I kind of like it. Feels peaceful." Sarah stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But damn, it felt good. The HOA meeting was that night. And you better believe Carol was there, armed with a stack of photos and enough righteous fury to power a small city. I walked in late, just to make a point, and took a seat in the back. Carol was already in full swing, waving her hands dramatically as she spoke. "And it's completely out of character for the neighborhood," she was saying. "Maplewood has standards. And this jungle, is an eyesore. It lowers property values. It's a safety hazard. What if children get lost in there? I almost laughed out loud. Lost? In a bunch of saplings? The HOA president, a balding guy named Greg who always wore golf shirts, adjusted his glasses. Thank you, Carol. We'll address the issue. Then he looked at me. Mark, do you have anything to say? I stood, all eyes on me, and walked to the front. Calm, collected, ready. Yeah, I said. I do. Those trees. They're on my property. They're legal. And frankly, I think they make the neighborhood look better. Greener. Healthier. You all keep talking about community values. Well, last I checked, trees were pretty valuable. Carol practically exploded. This is not about trees. This is about you deliberately defying the spirit of what? I shot back, my voice rising. Your control over everyone else. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You couldn't stand that I had one tree you didn't like. One. So now you have 50 to look at. Enjoy the view, Carol. Gasps rippled through the room. Greg raised his hands. Okay, let's calm down. But I wasn't done. I pay my dues. I follow the actual rules, not your made-up ones. And unless you can show me where it says I can't plant trees, this conversation's over. Then I turned and walked out, leaving Carol sputtering like a kettle about to blow. That night, as I sat on the back porch with a cold beer, looking out at my new private forest, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Victory. Carol might have the HOA in her pocket, but I had the law, and the law was on my side. At least, that's what I thought. Until the letter came. 2 days later, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope stamped with the HOA logo. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold letters. Notice of noncompliance. Excessive landscaping. Effective immediately, I had 10 days to remove the newly planted trees to restore the original appearance of the property. Failure to comply? $250 a day in fines. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling. Carol wasn't playing anymore. And neither was I. Because if they thought I was going to back down now, they had another thing coming. And this time, I wasn't just planting trees. I was going to make Maplewood wish they'd never messed with me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with that damn letter in front of me, the HOA's threat staring me in the face like a smug little grin. Excessive landscaping. What the hell did that even mean? Sarah shuffled in around midnight, rubbing her eyes. Mark, you're still up? I didn't answer. My laptop screen glowed, tabs open to everything from legal forums to landscaping blogs. I was past reason now. This wasn't just a fight about trees anymore. It was about principle, about freedom, about telling Carol and her HOA cronies that they didn't own me. They can't do this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. They can't tell me what to do on my own damn property. Sarah sighed, leaning against the counter. Mark, maybe it's time to let it go. Just remove a few trees. Show them you're willing to compromise. I looked up at her, feeling something dark coil in my chest. Compromise? Sarah, they want to strip me of my rights because Carol doesn't like looking at leaves out her window. If I give in now, we'll be living under her thumb forever. Next, it'll be the color of our door, the shape of our mailbox. Hell, maybe she'll tell us what curtains we can use. Sarah shook her head, her voice soft. I just don't want you to lose yourself over this. But I already had. Because the second she walked back to bed, I made another call. And by the next evening, the trucks were back. It started with more trees. Not 50 this time. 100. Then came the shrubs, the hedges, the flowering plants. I turned my entire property into something out of a botanical garden. Workers laid sod, built little stone paths, installed benches under arching trellises draped in vines. I even had a koi pond put in. If Carol wanted to accuse me of excessive landscaping, then by God, I was going to give her something to really complain about. And the best part? Every single thing I added was legal. I checked the bylaws twice. The HOA had no jurisdiction over plant quantity as long as it wasn't invasive species or blocking public sidewalks. By the time the weekend rolled around, my yard was unrecognizable. It wasn't a lawn anymore. It was a sanctuary. Birds chirped from the branches. A soft breeze rustled through leaves that hadn't existed 2 days ago. I even had solar lights installed along the pathways, so at night, the whole place glowed like an enchanted forest. And Carol? Oh, she was losing her mind. I caught her standing at the edge of her driveway that Sunday morning, phone in hand, snapping pictures like a paparazzo at a celebrity meltdown. Her little dog yapped like it knew I was public enemy number one. I smiled and waved. "Morning, Carol. Lovely day for a stroll through nature, don't you think?" She didn't answer, just stormed back inside, slamming her door so hard it rattled the glass. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The next HOA meeting wasn't a meeting. It was a war zone. I walked in, and the whole room went quiet. Every set of eyes turned toward me, half curious, half furious. Carol sat at the head of the table next to Greg, looking like a general about to issue marching orders. "Mark," Greg began, his tone clipped. "We need to talk about your property." "Oh, I figured," I said, leaning back in my chair, arms folded. Carol hasn't exactly been subtle. Carol slammed her hand on the table. "This is outrageous. You've turned a suburban yard into a jungle. It's a health hazard. What about rodents? What about snakes? What if someone falls into that ridiculous pond?" I smiled. Funny, none of that was a problem when half the neighborhood had backyard pools. But sure, Carol, let's pretend this is about safety. Gasps rippled through the room. Greg cleared his throat, sweat beading at his temple. "Mark, regardless of your feelings, the board has voted unanimously to impose fines unless you restore the property to its original state." "Unanimously, huh?" I said, leaning forward. "Interesting, because I just checked your bylaws. And nowhere, does it say how many trees or plants a homeowner can have. I'm in full compliance. You fine me, and I'll see you in court. And trust me, Greg, I've got the time and the money to make this very public." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Greg glanced at Carol, then back at me. "Mark, be reasonable." "No," I snapped. "I've been reasonable. You pushed. I pushed back harder. You think you run this neighborhood, but you don't run me. So here's my counteroffer. Leave me the hell alone, and I won't file a harassment suit against the HOA for targeting me without legal grounds." "Deal." Greg opened his mouth, closed it, and looked at Carol, who was shaking with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Sure it is," I said, standing up with a smile. "Because I just won." And then I walked out. Again, when I got home that night, I stood in my glowing garden, breathing in the scent of fresh earth and victory. Sarah joined me on the porch, her arms crossed but a smile tugging at her lips. "You're insane," she said softly. "Maybe," I said, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "But admit it, it's beautiful." She sighed, leaning into me. "Yeah, it is." And for a moment, everything felt perfect. Until the next morning, when I opened the door to find a city code enforcement officer standing on my porch, clipboard in hand. "Sir," he said, his tone official and cold, "we've had some complaints about your property. We need to talk." The officer's voice was calm, but his words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Complaints? From the city? Not the HOA this time. This was bigger." Sure," I said, stepping aside. "Come on in." He didn't. Instead, he glanced past me at the sprawling greenery behind the house. I saw his eyebrows twitch, just a little, like he wasn't sure whether to be impressed or horrified. "You've done quite a bit of landscaping," he said finally. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep it casual. "Big nature guy. Love trees." His expression didn't change. "We've received reports of possible violations of city ordinances regarding property drainage, utility easements, and fire safety." My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about those. Not once. "Sir," he continued, "if trees or structures interfere with city utility lines or emergency access, that's a serious issue. I'll need to conduct an inspection." And just like that, my world tilted. The inspection took an hour. The officer walked the property with a tape measure and a camera, jotting notes on his clipboard while I trailed behind like a nervous kid waiting for his report card. Finally, he turned to me. "Here's the deal. Most of this, fine. But some trees are too close to the power lines. That pond, it's sitting over a drainage easement. Both are violations." My mouth went dry. "So what does that mean?" "It means," he said, flipping his clipboard shut, "you'll need to remove those specific items within 30 days, or the city will do it for you." and send you the bill." He handed me a notice and walked back to his truck without another word. And just like that, all my righteous fury, all my smug satisfaction, drained out of me like water through a sieve. Because this wasn't Carol. This wasn't the HOA. This was the city. And the city always wins. That night, I sat on the porch staring at my forest, the glow of the solar lights soft against the trees. Sarah came out, carrying 2 mugs of tea, and handed me one. "You okay?" she asked gently. I laughed bitterly. "Define okay." She sat beside me, silent for a moment. "You went to war, Mark. And honestly, you kind of won. Carol didn't break you. The HOA didn't break you. You stood up for yourself." "Yeah," I muttered. "And now I get to spend the next month tearing half of this down." Sarah smiled faintly. "Half. Not all. And maybe, when this is over, you'll still have something beautiful. Just smaller." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the fight drain out of me. She was right. This whole thing, every late-night plan, every dollar I spent, was never really about trees. It was about control, about proving I couldn't be pushed around. And I'd done that. Carol could stew in her pink sweatsuits for the rest of her life, knowing she didn't win. The next morning, I started making calls. I scheduled a crew to move the pond and relocate the few trees near the power lines. Costly? Yeah. Frustrating? Absolutely. But not the end of the world. And when it was done, 30 days later, I stood in the yard, sweat on my brow, and looked at what was left. Not 50 trees, not 100, but 30. Enough to give me shade, privacy, and peace. Enough to make the yard feel alive. Sarah slipped her hand into mine. "Looks perfect," she said softly. I smiled. "Yeah, it does." Across the street, Carol stood on her porch, arms crossed, eyes boring into me like twin lasers. I raised my mug of coffee in a little salute. She glared, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. But then, a week later, something strange happened. Cars started slowing down in front of my house. People stopped to take pictures. One day, a couple asked if they could walk through the garden. Apparently, word had gotten out. My yard wasn't just landscaping anymore. It was an attraction. A little slice of paradise in the middle of suburbia. So I put up a sign at the edge of the driveway. "Mark's Garden, take a stroll. Donations welcome." And guess what? People came. They came with cameras, with picnic baskets, with cash. My garden went viral on social media. Local news did a segment on it. And the best part? Every single time Carol looked out her window, she didn't see a clear view of the street. She saw people enjoying the forest she tried so hard to destroy. Guess this spirit of the neighborhood just got a whole lot greener. And me? I learned something that day. When life hands you a Carol, plant a forest. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.